a cold winter's night here in San Diego. I think the low is going to be something just ridiculous, like 58 degrees tonight. I survived the East Coast, although I'm going right back, so I really should watch what I say. We have a great episode talking about competitive pinball with Josh Sharp up for you here tonight. It's episode number 136 of Coast to Coast Pinball. Let's go. Welcome to Coast to Coast Pinball. My name is Nate Shivers. This is a podcast of commentary. A man out of quarters. How are you? Good evening. Coming to you not live from San Diego, California on February 17th. It's a Tuesday that feels like a Monday because I had President's Day off yesterday, and that's a good thing. So, what I'm doing here with episode 136 is going to be something new. We're going to do a new thing, a new happening on Coast to Coast Pinball. We've got to always be changing something up so that you don't get bored and that I don't get bored. And something that's occurred to me over the course of 135 previous episodes is I think there has been a unbalanced and unfair and not appropriate amount of time and discussion spent on competitive pinball. For me, I think there should be more. It fascinates me. It's interesting to me. I think it will help grow pinball overall in general. And I want to talk about more competitive pinball. So, I dreamt up a new segment that we were going to do every month now, focused on competitive pinball. And I invited Josh Sharp, friend of the show. Josh Sharp, been on the show a few times before. Top-ranked player, son of Roger Sharp, etc., etc. IFPA president, all-around good guy, to come on that segment. And I envisioned like a cool 10 to 15-minute segment once a month on one show talking about competitive pinball. And I quickly realized while we recorded tonight's episode that it's just going to have to be its own episode every time because Josh and I get going and start talking about pinball, and he has such great knowledge and such a fantastic angle at pinball, having been a part of it literally his whole life, that we start talking about tournaments and competition and pinball in general, and it just runs the whole show. So this is the closest thing you'll ever see to me having a co-host, is going to be a monthly episode with Josh coming on. Why does Josh want to do this? Well, Josh is the president of the IFPA, the International Flipper Pinball Association, which is there to promote and grow competitive pinball. And I think it's important for him to go tell a story. Coast to Coast Pinball, thanks to you, friendly listeners, has become a great outlet for stories like that to be told. And I think Josh sees some value in that, which makes me very happy. And I see value in having Josh on. It motivates me to do shows more often when I have someone fun to talk to. So that's what we're going to do. There comes a problem, though, because I wanted to name the shows that Josh is going to be on, or in my original thinking, the segment. I wanted a cool name so that I could record cool bumpers with either Teresa or our secret announcer guy. And I was having trouble coming up with the names. So here's some of the names for the shows that we came up with. I'll let you hear them, and then what we finally ended up with, I will not even say is maybe the best name, but it's just the one we're going to go with. So at first I had Teresa go ahead and record the obvious one. It was the obvious one. It's this one.
The Competitive Corner.
Yeah, so the competitive corner, right? You hear that and you're like, oh, they're talking about competition, because that's really what Josh is coming on to. We're going to talk about all things competition, tournaments, leagues, Whopper points, how they're run, how they work, etc. Competitive corner. However, I think you and I can both agree, friendly listener, that that's a terrible name and really lame. That's really lame. So, next, secret announcer guy, he actually came up with this one on his own, and it's a little more aggressive.
Win or Die with Josh Sharp.
Yeah, see, that's cool and all, win or die with Josh Sharp, but it plays up the whole competition angle, but nobody's actually going to die here. I'm fairly certain no deaths will occur from losing a pinball game or a tournament. So we couldn't go with that one. Teresa had her own idea. She came up with this.
Tournament Talk.
That's nice. It's punchy. It's to the point. Tournament talk. Yeah. Except that's not really all we're doing here. We're also going to talk about leagues and gameplay in the tournaments and the players who are ranked, and it's just Tournament Talk's just the scope of that's a little too narrow for what we're looking to do here. We also came up with this catchy one that I think you'll all probably appreciate.
Nate beat Josh Sharp at America's Most Haunted every time they ever played.
And although Secret Announcer Guy speaks the truth there, because that is indeed true, I have beaten Josh Sharp every game of America's Most Haunted he and I have ever played. That's too long. That's too long. And speaking of too long, I thought Teresa's last idea here was also probably a bit too long for the title of this segment.
Josh Sharp's wife lets him stay up late and talk about pinball on Skype.
Yeah, see, she's trying to be funny, trying to make a joke. Nice try. I like it, though. I like her spirit on that. So what we're going to end up going with is also super lame, I guess, but it's all I got. It's simple, it's quick, and it'll let you know when you see this in the title of the shows from here on out, or until Josh gets sick of doing this, that this show is going to be dedicated on some level to Josh and I talking about what's going on in competitive pinball. I want feedback from listeners on this. If you have questions for Josh or kind of for discussion topics that would interest you as a listener, as a hobbyist, as a player, whether you're ranked in the top 30, 50 in the world, or you're ranked like me somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 in the world, if there's something that's occurred to you about your local tournaments, big tournaments that you might travel to, and you'd like to hear conversation about that, I'd love to hear from it. I really want to address this side of the hobby a bit more on Coast to Coast Pinball. I think it's an important thing going forward. I can only talk about boutique pinball so much. That's not true. I could do that all night. But you know what I'm saying? Right? Like, I can only talk about the price of games so much. I think there's a lot of newsworthy stuff. There's some great personalities. There's great stories. There's a lot of effort, whether it be through Josh and Zach at IFPA or Doug and his whole crew at Papa, or all the hard work that goes into all the big tournaments, the small tournaments, the local leagues. I think there's some great angles here, and I think that's where a lot of the growth in the hobby is happening. So we're going to do it. It's going to be this. It's going to be Josh and I talking about competitive pinball on a monthly basis.
Sharp and Shivers.
I'd like to welcome back Mr. Josh Sharp to Coast Pinball. How are you tonight, Josh?
I'm doing great, Nate. How you doing?
I was good. We were just talking before the show, and I was in normal Nate voice, and now you hear like stupid,
that's right.
like podcast voice. It's on. So.
It's Harry Shearer time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're live, not live. How's Chicago?
Chicago sucks.
It's cold, right?
Yeah, it's like 6 today or whatever it is today.
Yeah.
I at least I now have a new battery in my car that came one day too late, as I was the guy at work that needed to ask everyone if they could jump me, so that was fun.
You were that guy.
I was that guy.
That's all right. That's all right. I had to take my hoodie off around 10 a.m. It was too warm outside when I went out to get something out of my car. So, Josh, you're here because this is the first time we're going to do this, but we're going to make this a monthly happening. This is going to have a great crazy name, which I don't have yet, but we'll have by the time the show goes live.
Looking forward to hearing the bumper, which actually probably would have already aired. So
it's already aired, so
it's great.
You've heard it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I haven't recorded it yet, but it'll get done. But what I want to do is put a spotlight onto competitive pinball in a more organized and informed way by having you come on the show and talk about what's happening in tournament pinball at any given time and what's coming up and what the feedback is to that side of the pinball hobby. And I'm thankful that you agreed to come on the show every month and do this.
Absolutely.
For those of you who haven't been listening and don't know and haven't followed the show and don't know who Josh is the president of the IFPA, which is the International Flipper Pinball Association. Where are you ranked right now, Josh? You like 16th?
I am 16. Oh man, Andre just hopped me. After the new system went into place, he sent me a nice email that I found my way to hop him through our magical make the formula whatever we want, so I can move up.
So Andre Messikov is now bumped back ahead of you.
He is the West Coast in the house.
But you're 16th in the world, and that's still amazing, right? When you think about the whole world, you're 16th.
Yeah, it used to be sort of painstaking for me to watch myself slowly fall as the kids started popping out and I stopped playing as much. But, I like to think that even in my far less popular travels that I'm still kind of able to hang around up there. Maybe not amongst the, where Zach is these days like I used to, but, somewhere in half of Zach's points.
For the record, Zach is number 4 in the world.
Yeah.
Your brother, Zach. Somebody asked me today, when are you doing another show? For my friends who don't know this hobby, ask, hey, when's your next show? As if they know what I'm doing. And I said, well, actually, tonight I'm having one of the top 20 players in the world come on the show. And they said, top 20? Well, how many are there? So I had to look up and let them know that I'm officially the 4,433rd ranked pinball player in the world, according to the Whopper points. So a little way for me to go to catch you there.
Yeah, you know what? You have a whole ceiling ahead of you that you can you got plenty of room before you plateau.
Exactly. I'm on the way up, as they say. So, speaking of the points is sort of the focus. There's been a lot of changes with the IFPA World Pinball Player Ranking System this year. We just went through the state championships. We're going to get into all that, but I think we should talk about the points and how people are earning points to get their rankings up, not just for the top guys. We get the top 25 on your IFPApinball.com page, but what about just guys like me who are playing in local events, playing in the occasional big event that they bump into, and they want to track where they rank in the world? There's points given for tournaments. We're here to talk about tournaments and competition. What's the idea right now on how you're setting the points to be awarded, and why the big change that we just went through, and how's it worked, I guess, is what I'd love to hear you kind of talk about.
So this was by far the biggest change we've had since 2009. We've had little tweaks and adjustments here and there over the last 5 years, but the biggest issue that we faced and that I had been avoiding for many years is trying to figure out a way where you can argue that a tournament held down the street here in Chicago with 7 people shouldn't be worth as much as Papa.
That would be a pretty easy argument,
right?
Yeah.
So there's sort of those are two big extremes. But our system, it was really sort of, if you look at it from like a political view, it was sort of the Democratic versus Republican system. And we seeded a minimum floor of points that every event would get per year. So the old base value used to be 25 points, no matter what. If you ran the greatest tournaments in sliced bread once a year, or you and 3 buddies got together at a bar down the street on a weekend to run something, it would be worth the same base points. And, the feedback of how insanely unfair that is, it was one of those things that we knew, but there was no real good way of trying to quantify, like, what that difference is between Joe's bar down the street and Papa.
Yeah.
And, through years of sort of debating about what makes, a tournament more or less valuable, or more or less, what we in the IFPA circles, the talk was what makes something a truer test of skill. So the new system focused on how can we find ways that the result of a tournament is a better or worse test of skill for those players. Meaning, if Keith Elwin shows up, and if I want to play Keith Elwin, if I play him once, I have a decent chance of beating him. If we play a best out of 100, the longer you make the match, the more likely he is to win. So it really started to boil down to meaningful games played in a tournament. And the more games you played, the better, in theory, that result would be in terms of those standings representing a truer test of skill, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Is there any weight to the tournament based on who shows up? If the top 10 players are all there, does that affect what happens?
It does.
Points?
So everyone, the best analogy I can have is you go to a tournament and there's a big bucket of water, and every player has a cup of water, and they all dump some points into that bucket to make it a little bit bigger. And that was under the old system as well. So the difference between Joe's Bar and Papa, we would just say, well, it doesn't matter what the format was, and the fact that Papa was this 5-day grind fest and Joe's Bar was, everyone played this game once. We would just argue, well, it's the players that show up that dictate the value. And, there were a lot of people that felt like for the effort that they put in running these huge events with, qualifying for 50 hours and then, I mean, you've watched, the Papa broadcast where, we're going to run a final that's going to last from 11 a.m. until 3 a.m. or whatever. Mm-hmm. And comparing that effort to, everyone play a game once and walk away needs to be looked at and evaluated better. And we got to the point with as I get older and I have more responsibilities that aren't maintaining our website and, entering results and blah, 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 we've put more on tournament organizers to like submit their own events to the calendar, submit their own results. And back in the day, I would be doing all of that myself. So as the organizers have gotten more responsibility put onto them due to my excessive laziness, the opportunity to try to dig into what their formats are was something that we felt we could now try to tackle, since there's now this like web communication interface between the director and the IFPA. So between that's kind of how the new version was born. And the new version, there is no guaranteed, it's I like to tell people it's pure capitalism, baby. There's no seeding the pot with any sort of minimal value. Every tournament will be worth whatever it is worth based on how many players show up, who those players are, and how good their format tests the skill of the players.
And the format testing the skill of the players, that sort of alludes to how many games are played on how many machines?
Yes. So different machines, and we're only, I mean, after being dark for a month and not having the rankings updated, we're walking through the organizers in terms of the information we're actually trying to get from them, and it's definitely been a challenge, but we'll get there. So a meaningful game played if you take like a best out of 3 match, we count that as 3 meaningful games played. So a best of 3 is worth more than a single game match. A best of 5 is worth more than a best of 3. Anything you can do to add more data to what ends up being the result of that tournament will increase what we call the tournament grading percentage of that tournament.
So let me ask you this, and this popped up when you're talking about the old style. Were you seeing players coming to larger tournaments ever that had these high rankings because maybe they had run an insane just number of tournaments in their local area, and then, say, walking into Papa or Texas or wherever and just getting obliterated by the guys who really are the best in the world? Was that sort of thing happening? Were you getting an uneven ranking out of that?
It didn't really happen up towards, the top. I know that there were definitely, there's few regions in the U.S., and I can speak to the U.S. better than I can around the world, but there's few regions that offered enough competitive pinball on their local scene to be able to compete with someone whose resume included, some of the bigger events. So, and I'll use his name because it's a name that we always sort of we rerun the rankings, and it's like, where's this guy now? But Aaron Nelson, who was in Portland and he's now in California, he was kind of the local hero of Portland, and he would win a bunch of stuff. And the argument was, this guy is in the top 50 and he doesn't have to leave Portland, and I was okay with that. And the fact that he never really got much higher than that by staying in Portland was kind of okay for me. If we saw him, Aaron is ranked 4th and he has not left Portland, that, the idea of kind of being able to avoid the best players on the planet,
sure,
at some point you end up plateauing.
How hard is it for you, and maybe it's not at all, because I know you're a businessman also, as well as, a great pinball player and, kind of a
one pays
advocate.
Much better than the other.
No kidding. I know that so well. How hard is it for you to sort of separate yourself when you're looking at these sort of decisions, and you guys are talking about, how do we weight this? Should somebody who never leaves Portland even be in the top 100 players in the world? How do you pull yourself out of that with your deep, deep roots in history into competitive pinball? You've been doing this since you were 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
How do you pull yourself out and not be kind of, on some levels it probably helps a lot that you do have all of that history.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of it comes down to behind the scenes, Brian Shepard and I, running a simulation, and then really, we'll shoot messages to each other of, does this pass the smell test? And you look at the top 25, you look at the top 50, you look at the top 100, and through the years of getting to know these guys and being friends with a lot of the, at least US players, you can sort of get a decent feel that, it looks okay. I remember back in the 2009 was a much worse change than this that required, I don't even want to get into it, it was crazy, but we would run simulations, and to not have, like, Keith Elwin not being number one was, this simulation is junk. and there were, hundreds of simulations that we ran, and there was just, you kept tweaking dials until it started to look okay. And what happens is we have this plan in our mind of what, and I've talked with Mark Steinman about it at Papa, who, a couple of years ago, he was like, talking about the need to grade tournaments based on format. And my response was, that's great. I would love to. It's impossible. And, what I told him is our goal is always the rankings have to look like Disneyland to us. It needs to look like something that people can value as something accurate enough to be taken as sort of the official rankings of the sport. If we believe in something theoretically that should make the rankings more accurate and it doesn't, we throw it in the garbage. And there's a lot of that. So back in 2009, one of the things that, what we've always had was, the limit of 15 events on your resume counting towards your ranking, so it wasn't unlimited.
Yep.
And back then we also had a cap as to how much a tournament was worth. And outside of the majors, the most that a tournament could ever go up to was 50. And it was because of what we called the Swedish death spiral, which was anytime you left anything uncapped, all of a sudden, out of the top 100, 86 of them would be Swedish guys. And, you start talking about things not passing the smell test. And theoretically, Brian and I are talking about, like, this should work. Like, this makes sense, right? Someone who competes in these events, should be worth more than someone who competes in these events. And it's like, yep, absolutely, let's run it. This looks like crap. Okay, let's throw it in the garbage. That you end up risking sort of your ranking system becoming a mockery of nobody would take it seriously. So, we get a lot of people every time we switch systems. It's always the worst system ever, and everyone's going to quit, and it's terrible. And it's something that we've learned over the years that to me, I love that feedback because it means they're interested. And what would be much worse to me would be, oh yeah, no, nice, they changed it, okay. And nobody caring.
Yeah, apathy is not the emotion
it's
you're
worse.
looking for. It is. I noticed you took, a fair amount of heat from some, and this is maybe just a limited perception on my part, so no offense to those of you who might have been...
No offense to Hilton.
I didn't say that. There may be offense to Hilton. We've just started. No. I saw some people running tournaments that clearly were running sort of local, probably in my mind they were 10 to 20 person tournaments, a lot of the same faces every week, pretty comfortable thing, more of a club or a league. And some of those people took a lot of offense to the fact that their tournament that they put their hard work into that got 25 points, base points, now is worth like 6 or 10 or whatever it might be worth. That seemed to be one of the first kind of outcries when the change was announced. And you were pretty good about, saying, well, here's why. And I wanted to scream and say, dude, you have 7 people at your tournament. How can you, like, what are you standing on here? But you were pretty good about, being real fair about it. Has that slowed down now? If people started to kind of come around and see that, a big weekly tournament that gets 40 people should just be worth more than your weekly tournament in, North Dakota? And I say North Dakota because there's no pinball in North Dakota.
It's, it's tough. The opinions that we get, and there's very few people that I can actually have a conversation with that I know their opinion isn't based sort of in this shadow of how it personally impacts them.
Yeah.
It's like, we'll announce a new system and release the rankings, and it's like, oh, good. Okay, so there's 30 emails that this thing is awful. Let's see how many of those 30 people went down. All right, all 30 of them. And there's 30 emails of people that think this is the greatest thing ever. Oh, they all went up. That's great. So outside of that, I think, the leg that I stand on with this system is that we used to sort of band-aid the fact that you got your base points for the year, and then you were motivated to not run any more events because you were only allocated that certain amount of points. And now, if you have 7 people, you can run an event every single day if you want. And you can run it, in such a way that you can earn 100% on those 7 players, which is whatever, 3.5 points plus, whatever players add to the pot. So if you really wanted to, even at 3.5 points times, let's just say you take a few days off and you run it 300 days a year instead of 365, there are 1,000 points for whatever state you're in that is available to you if you want to put in the effort. And that's something that allows me to feel better about this system. Is it a ton of work to run, an event for 3.5 points? Yes, it's awful. I ran a monthly tournament here in the suburbs, and we play 4 games in a night, and it's worth, I think I won and I got like 1.2 points. And, the choice is on me to not run it longer every month to try to accumulate more games to make the result more meaningful, and B, not run it more than once a month because I just don't have that time commitment. But sure. The old system was, we don't care how much time you have available. If you want to run something 10 times instead of 1 time, you're now going to get 2.5 points instead of 25 for the year. And that was sort of, a slap into the face to the people that were putting in the work. And it was really subsidizing those people who weren't putting in the work. So we ended up seeing a lot of, especially when December hits, and for us with the calendar, you need to get your tournament up 30 days in advance. By the time middle of November hit, here came the flood of like, oh, I'm running an annual event at this new place right before the year ends so I can get my 25.
Yeah.
And that's not what this is about. I'd always rather err on the side of the people that are putting in the work, because it's easier to be like, listen, dude, you can do exactly what they're doing. And tangent a little bit, but we my wife and I went to the movies for Valentine's Day weekend, and we stopped over at GameWorks because she rarely goes, and sort of checked it out during the weekend. And oh my God, there are 8,000 more people there on the weekend than there are on a Tuesday night. But I was noticing, people were playing all the pins, and I didn't know who any of them were. And I shot myself an email, but I sort of remembered that I don't have flyers on the game talking about when the tournament takes place. And it just sort of reminded me when I ran my league in college that, you really have to try to get the word out. Nobody's going to be knocking on the door to join this tournament the same way that nobody knocked on the door to join the Illini Pinball League back in '98. You really have to put in the effort to grow that player base, even if it's, 1 to 2 people every few months. And, I was remotivated to try to grow that GameWorks player base a little bit.
Excellent. So the state championships just happened, the state championship series, and there was a lot of buzz. I thought way more buzz this year than last year, which points to growth, which I think is what we're all looking for and is good.
More people on Facebook, I think.
Facebook, too.
Being able to Twitter it and whatever the kids do these days.
Yeah, there were live streams, I know. There's video out there. How, from your point of view, as you see the results roll in and you saw the kind of the shakeout of those state championships, what was your take this year on how the state championships played out? Were there any things that you saw happen that you would like changed or you would like to expand upon?
Definitely. The first thing we look at, and we always look at year over year, is just sort of the players that are involved in the process. And we saw a 28% increase between, the first year and the second year in terms of players that played in at least one event in one of the states. And that was great to see. It's always nice to see, the numbers pointing up, and we'll see if that number is up 30% again next year. Or, up, as long as it's up 1%, I'll be okay with that. But I think there was a little bit more of sort of familiarity with players dealing with the process. So it was definitely easier logistically to get all the state reps together. And for most of those guys, it was, same thing as last year, everyone okay. And, I know Zach, there's a big part of what we do is also trying to coordinate a media effort to, have a better chance at hitting some good, press points by having this thing happening, all over the U.S. at the same time and feeding this thing into nationals. And Zach was definitely able to hit a few home runs on the PR front. And I think it was Vermont. They had, I don't know, it felt like there were like 8 or 9 news pieces one morning where they just kept going back to where the state championship site was at. And it was just like, oh my God, they had like 20 minutes of airtime during the 3-hour morning news. And that kind of stuff, it's why the IFPA was created. One of our biggest goals was generating media impressions and trying to let people know that not only is pinball not dead and it didn't die 30 years ago, but that it's really in this big resurgence.
So something that came up with, this was actually not a Pinside conversation, this was somebody I was talking with around the Arcade Expo event out here in California before the state championships. They were telling me, and this was based here in California, that there were some rumblings of some players who were eligible to play in multiple state championships.
Yes.
And were waiting as long as they possibly could to declare which state they'd be playing in.
The Bob Matthews rule, yes.
I said no names here.
I don't mind. Since I know I can say these names to their own faces,
sure.
I will gladly I will spread the wealth.
So what are your thoughts on players who are qualified in multiple states and then choose a state to play in based on where they might find the easiest path to win because they want to play in the national championships?
So, and I probably had a diatribe on Pinside about this, but so I'm really into people taking the process for what it means to them. So some players, for me, I want to go to whatever state championship is the closest to my house because I want to go, I want to get it done, and I want to go home. And for me, based on where I live in Illinois, there is a chance that one year the Wisconsin championship or the Indiana one could be closer than the Illinois one, should we ever hold it, down either
East
in
St.
Champaign or at Chuck's in East St. Louis. The year we hold it there, I have probably 3 states that I can travel to, especially if we get like Iowa in the mix by then. But, besides, my personal motivation being I just want to get home as fast as possible, there's definitely people that are motivated in being crowned the state champion of the state that they live in against all of the people that they compete in that state, and that's great. There's people that look for the easiest path to nationals where, there's a bunch of prize money and perhaps, some could argue bigger glory in being the national champion, and I think that's fine too. And, similar to the new ranking system rewarding organizers that are willing to put in the effort to put in more events and run more events and try to attract more people, the people who have this option of being able to choose which state championship they want to play in, they earn that right by going out, traveling to these other states, spending money, competing, playing well enough to beat all of the people that, lived in that state. It's not like they're taking anything that wasn't earned. Every opportunity that they have under the system is something that they've earned. And from my perspective, anytime, let's just say, I'm not allowed to play Wisconsin if I qualify for Illinois or something like that because I live in Illinois, forgetting about the fact that we don't, I don't know where Nate Shivers is from. I haven't seen your driver's license and you haven't shown me your mailing address and blah, blah, blah. Forgetting about any verification. If we get to a point where if I know at the beginning of the year I want to play in Wisconsin, and the only way I can do that is if I intentionally don't qualify in Illinois, now I'm motivating people to not play pinball, and that's awful.
It's a great point. I think the thing that I thought about that sort of caught me a little off guard was to be the state champion, I think, eventually, because we're early on in this. This is year 2.
Yeah. You can't get much earlier.
So it's really early. But I think, being national champion or being the Papa champion, those things, that's a very, very, very elite few people who are probably ever going to reach those levels. State championships, to me, are a nice I won't say attainable even for someone like me per se, but to a lot of people who are into this hobby and active on Pinside and hopefully listen to this show, I think that is something they could reach for. And I think it gets a little watered down when, let's say, you're in Oregon and 3 or 4 of the better players, or just, top 15 or 16 players, decide that their easier path is through Washington, Idaho, Nevada,
right,
and jump out of the state. So when you do win the state championship, players that maybe played more tournaments in your state and are much more attached to your state as far as the pinball community weren't there to be beaten. It sort of puts an asterisk next to your championship win. It's like, oh yeah, but whoever. Oh, Bob Matthews didn't even play. He went over to Nevada.
Right.
So are you really the state champion of California?
I guess, that goes both ways. I think, sticking with Bob, if he stays in California, you have this, you look at the Arizona standings and you have this guy that is at the top of the Arizona standings not represented in that field's final. So those players are now competing against, they competed all year against people within Arizona and all the Arizona events, and the person that earned the most points in that state is missing.
Yeah.
So I understand, from the residency aspect in terms of who, I live in Illinois. I play against people in Illinois for the last, 20 whatever years. And, to me, it is important to play in Illinois and, know that between Zach and I, one of us isn't winning. And it was sort of humorous. You sort of talk about like how, yeah, we're going to, I'm so going to win. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm so going to win. Dude, we're both not going to win. This is like, this is already a given. We already know this. And, to me, I think everyone earns the right to just make it about whatever they want for themselves, especially at year 2.
What about declaring your state before the very end? What if you put, because that's the other thing I had I had an issue with personally, was that somebody got left out of one of these 2 tournaments depending on which way somebody went. And this isn't just the Bob thing. This could have happened anywhere. There's somebody there who's qualified, and then not qualified.
Trent qualified in like 29 out of the 33 states.
Exactly. Wouldn't it be nice if you were in that, like, say you're 25th and it's July and you're thinking, man, I really want to qualify in this state, and you can do all this work, but you really don't know. It doesn't matter how much you work or how hard you put into it or how many tournaments you go to, because if the right people go in or out, it could put you in or out. It almost takes a lot out of the process of that qualification to me on some level. I don't know. It felt funny to me.
I guess, it really, I deal with that mostly at the Illinois level. So there's a lot of, even in July when people are looking at the standings, especially, actually for us, it happens after Expo comes, because that's when our standings then get a huge influx of international players and out-of-state people. So all of a sudden it's just like, boom, I went, my dad went from like 9th to 47th, and he was like, oh my God, what does this really mean? And that conversation, I enjoy the banter in our local community of anyone coming from out of state to here? No way, right? And sort of the talk of like pulling up the list and going through like who people think are in, who people think are out, and what, everyone's goal was, I need to be somewhere in 40th is probably going to be the bubble spot. And so people are going to come to that conclusion anyway, whether it's actually 16th or it's 40th. There's going to be sort of this theoretical bubble of something you have to hit. And then, yeah, it does come down to maybe falling 1 or 2 people one way or the other. And I remember we actually had a pinball league night the night before everyone's declarations were due, and my dad was 2 spots out, and there were 2 people that were undeclared, and they were both deciding between Indiana and Illinois. And the banter of, me trying to convince these guys to go to Indiana so my dad could qualify for Illinois, like, I enjoyed that. And I don't know if my dad enjoyed it or not, but I think keeping a dialogue going, there's something entertaining to the process. And as far as, declaring, like, if it's January 1st and I'm declaring, Illinois on day 1, what if I don't make Illinois and I make another state? Do I then have the right to play in another state?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I would certainly say that I really don't like the late decisions, because I think that sort of to me it takes away the chase. I like the chase. I like the, I get it that everyone moves around. People are all over the place playing in the big tournaments, and maybe you don't know. But I would love to see some sort of like final day, like, almost like when the college kids have to say what college they're going to, their declaration day. I would love to see that date on like October 1st or August 1st or whatever it is. And then after that, you have to now put some work in to qualify for your state, and you can actually track event by event, point by point, who's going to get in, who's going to get out. Because I don't see much of that right now with the bigger states. You just don't know who's going to actually show up.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and obviously, I really only have the soundboard here in Illinois, and we have sort of a mini bubble of that. But certainly, like, Pennsylvania by far is the worst. That they'll have. I think Doug Polka did all the emails, and he doesn't even bother emailing people until people start making decisions, because he has to go 200 deep or whatever before he actually finds people in Pennsylvania that are willing to go.
Well, I applaud the whole thing just from a standpoint of, I think the state championship series could be one of the biggest tools to grow competitive pinball, because we all want to go to Papa, we all want to have our dream of having a name raised on a banner, but let's be very real. There's a separation from 100 and up to everybody else, that you either are going to get there someday or you're not. The state series, I think, is something that's sort of within reach of a lot of people that are in this hobby.
Yeah, I remember Zach and I, this was after the first year, and sort of we were driving back from the Illinois one, and we didn't end as late as we did this year. We ended at a reasonable time, but just driving back, and Zach was sort of on his phone on Facebook, and it was just like, holy crap. You just see everyone with like their reports and the brackets that are up, and everyone talking about what happened to them. And we just sort of joked that this will be by far I think the biggest thing that we have going for us at the IFPA. And we've seen, this sort of work not only in the U.S., but you look at all of the countries that are sort of mimicking what we did with the SCS. And, you have the United Kingdom is doing it, Austria, Australia, New Zealand, Italy is starting one this year, and they're all seeing the same thing. For a lot of people, you talk about, maybe I can be the state champ, but for a lot of these guys, it's maybe I can qualify for the state final, and they feel like they already won by just making it into the top 16. So, for us, I know we talk about it on our website, we didn't have 528 players competing on, SCS Day. We had 528 finalists competing on SCS Day. And I think there's a really important distinction there. And I know someone, I think it was Connecticut, they gave out plaques to all top 16 people, and then, Pinside devolved into, the T-ball, everyone gets a ribbon thing. And I think, it really is important to know that a lot of these guys that end up making the cut, they earned that by putting in, I won't say blood, sweat, and tears, because it's probably not quite that hardcore, but something to that effect of, they really earned their place at the table.
All right, so tell me about the national championships. When is it? How's it going to be played out? The events that are around it, and who's going to win?
So, nationals is in Vegas, March something. March 26th, the Thursday. Yeah. So, I'm out there for work at one of our bigger industry trade shows, and that trade show is Wednesday and Thursday. That is held in conjunction with the International Pizza Expo. I can't undersell how awesome that show is.
That sounds amazing.
And the fact that I think we have they get into our show, we get into their show, reciprocating pass for the last day of the show.
Nice.
So, if Vegas isn't a good enough sell, the International Pizza Expo is unbelievable. But Nationals is going to be held at the Pinball Hall of Fame that Thursday all day. And then following that will be the IFPA Pin Masters, which will be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which will be a Papa Circuit event. With respect to Nationals, I know that, it was sort of the same thing with sort of not knowing how the SCS was going to go the first year. I remember having conversations with people online about, nationals last year and thinking, who's going to show up for, what could potentially be a 4-0 loss in the first round. You're going to show up and play 4 games, and it's like, okay, I'm out. And I think we had 29 states in the SCS last year, and I remember talking to Zach about it, and it's like, if we can get, 16 guys would be awesome. But in my mind, it was really maybe going to be like 12. Maybe 12 to 14 people will actually show up. And last year we were running it in conjunction with the Lions Spring Classic. So, if in case and it's actually an important part of why we're running the Pin Masters that same weekend, is to give people sort of more things to do when they're out there that isn't just nationals. But, last year we got 25 out of 29, and I was blown away at that percentage of people that showed up. And I think it sort of stretches that, state championship glory of, you look at the winners, and there's tons of people that are ranked, under 1,000 and 2,000 and 700th and 500th. For a lot of these guys, winning their state was this huge upset because maybe they had, one high-ranked player to deal with who didn't make it. And sort of this is their chance at some major glory. And despite the fact that tickets to Vegas suck because it's March Madness weekend out there, people are signing up again and really want to give it a chance and at their chance at glory, and they don't want to pass that up.
Is Pin Masters limited? Is there a certain cap on the amount of people limited to that tournament?
It is. There are. We're aiming to do 3 shifts of 36 people, so it's 108 people.
And that's a pin golf tournament, correct?
It is a pin golf tournament.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Well, that's exciting. I love to hear that. Do you know, is there any planning for any sort of streaming of the national championships?
I believe that the Indisc crew that just broadcast out in Southern California,
they did a great job. Yeah.
They did. They will be bringing their lovely equipment to Vegas, and we hope to stream not only all of nationals, but all of the Pin Masters as well.
That's tilt cams included, I'm hoping.
I hope so, man.
That's awesome. That's very cool. So I had a couple other notes here. We should do some sort of rundown here and kind of hit some of these highlights. We're going to have you on again next month, so we don't have to cover the whole world because it won't be another year. What's your plans for Papa? Are you going to not disappoint Coast2Coast Pinball this year?
Right. The chances of me finishing higher than last year, I hope to finish higher than last year.
That'd be a successful tournament, yeah.
I'm sort of, at least looking back, I make the finals every 3 years, so this is probably not going to be a great year for me.
So we should not put our money on
Josh
Sharp.
I would sell Josh Sharp short.
Okay, all right. Shorting Josh Sharp at Papa. What are your thoughts on a D division at Papa, if anything?
I think it's fantastic.
You think it's a good thing to keep extending it out?
Yeah, I think, and we can get into a little bit, but the intimidation factor of getting people to play competitive pinball and give it a shot, our player numbers continue to grow year over year. And I can tell you for a fact that the player numbers are not growing from the top 100. Those top 100 guys have been around forever.
Sure.
The people that are growing are the people that are willing to give it a shot, and then I know that they're going to love it. They just don't know that they're going to love it yet. And whatever organizers can do to sort of ease the fear and make people as comfortable as possible, and it's much easier on the local level. It's much harder on the bigger tournament level. But what the Papa guys are doing to try to make their big tournament level more inviting to newer players is great to me.
I noticed last year, jumping from the C division to the B division in Papa, just kind of more just because I wasn't really planning on winning. I just wanted to see what it was like in both of them. I noticed great players in both divisions, and I wasn't sure at the time if it was a money thing, since C cost less per entry than B, or if it was just simply guys feeling more confident that they could have success in C or whatever it was. But I noticed that there was a few really great players in C, and I wasn't alone in noticing this. I had emails and conversations. It was a little frustrating to some of the newcomers to watch some of the scores put up and think, wow, I have no chance against this person. This person's amazing. Why are they in the lowly C division? And I had the exact emails from some of those top players who said to me, hey, man, it was my first Papa. I was nervous. I wasn't jumping up into B. I just played great. And that's a fair argument, I think. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on running a tournament in where people should there aren't many tournaments with this type of divisions based on skill. I like it. I think it's great. I think it's a thing to, like you said, grow it and get the numbers up. What do you do if you're Josh Sharp and you're maybe 5 years into competitive pinball and you're ranked 290th in the world? Where do you play at Papa?
I play, and anyone who knows me that has asked, because I get that question a lot from people that are like, hey, man, what should I sign up for? And my answer is always, sign up for the lowest possible division that the tournament will let you play, because it only gets harder. And, I can remember that going back to, when I played in juniors divisions and dealing with, the verbiage of a juniors rule being 16 and under or under 16, and trying to negotiate my way to not having to play in the men's division because it was just going to suck. And I think putting the onus on the tournament organizers is the way to go. I think I think you've seen it anytime you try to bring up, people should be self-policing where they're playing. I think that's really unfair to those players who, like you said, a lot of those guys, are really intimidated already. And there's if you go one division up, it's just a new batch of sharks that are waiting to eat you alive. That, you put it on the tournament organizers to set whatever they feel like the proper criteria is for, what divisions of play they want to offer. And whether that includes, someone's WAPA rank or past, tournament experience at X, Y, and Z tournament, that's on them. And I think a player that's working within those rules, that's on them to make themselves feel as comfortable as they want and to have as good of a chance as of having success as they want for someone that's spending, I don't know how much it cost you for your Papa weekend, but for most people, it's probably, $1,000 plus, entries and whatever. The last thing you want to do is go and feel like dead money, and understanding that if you play a division down that you're allowed to play in, maybe you're then causing people that are in that division to feel like they're dead money. But at some point you have to focus on, you spent $1,000 to get there yourself. Focus on your own enjoyment. And that's the only thing that you can control, and not worry about the guys that are, worrying about you for you.
Sure. Let's talk about game selection in tournaments.
Yeah.
Most tournaments, you're going to play what's there. If I'm playing in San Diego, there's about 4 places to play. That's being generous, and those games aren't changing anytime soon. When you get to larger tournaments, and we get to the Papa circuit events, that level tournament, obviously game selection is important. What games should we be playing at high-level pinball tournaments?
In terms of, titles? Or
titles, era, how should these games be chosen? When should we know what games are going to be played? I notice there's been a lot of kind of talk with Papa slowly leaking out some of the games this year through the Papa TV.
Obviously that has, people have so much access to the facility these days, and you have, 800 people from the Pittsburgh Pinball League that have access into there every single day, that at some point you need to limit the local competitive advantage. But, I like having games released as soon as possible, but I also come from a world where I play in a lot of the tournaments I run in, and my rule is, as a player competing in this tournament, anything that I know, every other player should know immediately when I know it. So for me, it's tough to sort of know any other way. The idea of, and it was fun, definitely, when Papa starts, and I used to not fly out there for the first day, but just you sort of refresh the standings and you wait to see the game list pop up when the first result gets entered. And, there's something entertaining to that, but I think as you try to grow the sport, it's one of those things where it's intimidating to not know what you're going to play and then have it be thrown at you. I think the ability to know what you're going to play and be able to prep for that by, using Papa's various resources, whether it be, a Bowen tutorial or just a gameplay video, reading rule sets, maybe communicating on Pinside or on Tilt forums about strategy for a particular game. I think being able to have that dialogue ahead of time is not only better for players to feel more comfortable when they get there, but it's also exciting to have, that dialogue going for months leading up to the event, just in terms of promoting that event on an ongoing basis.
What are your thoughts when you get to Papa and you see Metallica next to something like Alien Star, like we saw last year? Two completely different games, completely different eras. I kind of come from the idea that, if you're going to be called the Papa World Champion or the best pinball player in the world, you should probably have to prove your skills on not just brand new Stern games.
Yeah, there's we come with the IFPA World Championship that we run. It's definitely an all eras tournament, and I think the old Whopper system sort of promoted these tournaments to do sort of a main and then a classics event on the side, and the fact that that's now gone away and tournaments can just do whatever they want, the chance to see more intermixed era tournaments, I think, to me, has always been, fascinating. And it really opens the door for, a wider breadth of people to be able to have success. So I don't have to be, you walk in, especially, you can take Expo as sort of the extreme example of the latest tournament every year. But, there's a lot of people that just won't play because out of the 10 games that are available, 5 of them they've never played before because they don't have a game out by them, and the other 5 they're too intimidated to play or whatever. When you mix in an Alien Star or a Target Pool or whatever, you start dealing with whether it's a player like Gene Lewin or these other classics masters that are all over the nation and the world. You really allow people to display their different sets of skill. And it was another point that came up with the new system is whether, what's a better test of skill? Me playing Keith Elwin on a Slick Chick machine from 1950, 60, whatever, or me playing against him on a Walking Dead machine. And, for a lot of people, the quick answer is, well, Walking Dead is a better test of skill because of the skill to luck ratio of older games versus newer games. And that was a pretty big debating point for months over, are we really going to draw a line in the sand that, a game pre-1985 is worth less than a game played on a game, quote-unquote, a modern era game? And, I definitely believe, and you see the people that have success at Papa Classics year after year, that maybe the skill to luck ratio on the older games is definitely more luck than newer games, but there's still such a substantial amount of skill that you see, players like Phil Birnbaum and Jerry Bernard and these guys that maybe aren't the modern experts, but they're really solid modern players. If they get in a tournament where, the games are half modern, half classics, they're extremely dangerous, especially compared to maybe some of the, what I call modern specialists, that are maybe really only good at rules knowledge on new Stern games, but you get them on a game where, they have to learn recovery skills because the ball isn't always in control and they're just dead meat.
That's interesting. That's good stuff. All right. I wanted to ask you, as president of the IFPA, what has the growth been like outside the United States? We have a lot of listeners in Australia. We have a fair amount in Europe, even Japan. What's happening outside of this country right now?
It's a good question. We don't track growth by country, but I know that in looking at, we have like cumulative players by country, and we now have 4 outside of the U.S. that has almost 11,000 players. France, Switzerland, and Germany are now all over 1,000. And so a lot of the percentage growth is happening, all over the place. I know Australia has been sort of, if you look at Australia 5 years ago to now, Australia 5 years ago was nothing, and now they're the 7th biggest country we have in terms of player count. So, and, a few years before that, it was definitely like, the UK and Italy that were sort of, coming. And, it's always exciting to see the countries develop. And it's really, even in the U.S., it's been this grassroots thing from when we started with 500 players 9 years ago it's never this big boom thing. It's really, it's more the tortoise than the hare, but it's just this thing that just keeps moving forward, and everyone just keeps grabbing one new friend and introducing them to the game. And it's exciting to see. Australia's pushing, they're at 851 now. I'd be shocked if they weren't at over 1,000 players before the end of the year. They have a lot of stuff down there. They have a great distributor support in AMD down there. And it's just consistent everywhere. The growth continues at this rate that continues to boggle my mind.
Do you know how many active players you have in the database right now?
I do. So 2014. So we look at not only the what we consider an active player is someone that played in at least one event, but sort of the same way that businesses look at customer retention, we also look at how many of those players have played in at least one event 2 years in a row and 3 years in a row. And between 2013 and 2014, the number of people that played in at least one event went from 9,800 to 13,369.
Wow.
And, that same sort of percentage growth, the number of players that played in at least one event over the last 2 years went from 4,100 to 5,400.
Wow.
And, whether that 13,000 number from 2014, is it going to go up again? I hope so. I never seem to think that it's possible to have that many players compete again, but every year it's amazing to think that back in 2011, we had 6,100 players compete in at least one event. So we really doubled the entire active competitive community in 3 years.
How do we get more money for these tournaments?
That's a great question. I actually have a conference call with DraftKings on Thursday, so hopefully that can lead to something. But, trying to find the right sponsor that sees value in competitive pinball is a very hard thing. I know that, we've been working with a couple of production companies, and we actually we have a final sizzle reel from one of the production companies that was at Expo filming. And, they see pinball as the next poker, and they now have their sizzle reel that they're going to pitch and try to sell to networks to see if anyone's interested in following this. And, I feel like an actor trying to get a gig, but, we'll hear a lot of no's, and we've heard a lot of no's over the last 9 years that we've been doing this. But it just takes, one yes to get things going in the right way.
Awesome. Well, Josh, that is going to do it for this month, but thanks for coming on, man. I think this is going to be a lot of fun kind of tracking IFPA as we go. We'll talk about the players, we'll talk about the events, we'll maybe look back on events and dissect them a little bit, see who won, how that affected rankings. We can go as deep as the listeners want us to go on this.
Can't wait, man. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. We'll talk to you real soon.
Sounds good.
All right. That is Sharp and Shivers. The first one, at least. Thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at coast2coastpinball@gmail.com. Coast, the number 2, coastpinball@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. We got stuff coming up. We got Papa coming up. We've got Texas Pinball Festival. It was announced on the Texas Pinball Festival schedule today. Saturday night, 9 p.m. at the Texas Pinball Festival. Coast to Coast Pinball Live with yours truly. We make a joke here that the show is not live. It will be Coast to Coast Pinball Live for those of you in attendance, and it will also be recorded for those of you not in attendance. But we will be doing a show live from the main conference room at the Texas Pinball Festival. We'll probably be basically going over the show, what we've seen, highlights, maybe have a guest or two on, and any other shenanigans that may happen. So if you're coming to Texas, I would so appreciate you hanging out and watching Coast to Coast Pinball Live on Saturday night. Hope to have some prizes and goodies for that too, for you spending your time with us on a busy Saturday night at one of the big shows of the year. So anyway, that is episode 136. Thank you, Josh Sharp. Thank you, Teresa, and Secret Announcer Guy. Appreciate all your hard efforts and work. Until next time, take care.